Well, normally when you think of vampires, what do you think of? Well, good old Count Dracula. Bram Stoker's version, the one we've all seen the movies of. Hey, the guy that lived in the house behind me, Vlad Tepes, the leader of Romania, done brutal and unspeakable acts to the Turks during their war times. Now, even though these are the ones that we're all familiar with, well, vampires, the stories and the legends, well, they existed way before Bram Stoker ever wrote Dracula. So thanks for stopping by the 33 Kings studio to hang with your old buddy, Uncle Jay, and let's check out the origins and the history of vampires. The origins of the vampire legend can be traced back to the ancient cultures across the world that believed in blood-sucking demons or creatures that fed off the life force of the living. Stories of these creatures can be found in mythology of many cultures, including the Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Greek mythology. In early folklore, these creatures were often depicted as terrifying beings that preyed on the innocent and were associated with death and decay. Many cultures in ancient Mesopotamia had stories involving blood-drinking demons. The Persians were one of the first civilizations thought to have such monstrous tales. Creatures attempting to drink blood from men were depicted on excavated pottery shards. And ancient Babylonia had their own tale of a mythical Lilitu, synonymous with the Hebrew Lilith, and her daughters, the Lilu of Hebrew demonology. Well, Lilith was considered a demon and was often depicted as subsisting on the blood of babies. Now, the legend of Lilith originally included some traditional Jewish texts. Now, according to medieval folk tradition, she was considered to be Adam's first wife before Eve. In medieval Europe, during this time in the 18th century, there was a frenzy of vampire sightings in southeastern Europe and Transylvania, with the frequent stakings and grave diggings taking place to identify and kill potential vampires. Even government officials were compelled into hunting and staking of those that were thought to be vampires. Despite being called the Age of Enlightenment, during which most folkloric legends were quelled, the belief in vampires increased dramatically, resulting in what could only be called mass hysteria throughout most of Europe. The panic began with an outbreak of alleged vampire attacks in East Prussia in 1721, and in the Habsburg monarchy 1725 to 1734, which spread to other localities. Two famous vampire cases, which were the first to be officially reported, involved the corpses of Peter Blagojevich and Arnold Pale from Serbia. Blagojevich was reported to have died at the age of 62, but allegedly returned after his death asking his son for food. When the son refused, he was found dead the following day. Now, Peter soon supposedly returned and attacked some neighbors who died from blood loss. And in the second case, Arnold Pale, an ex-soldier turned farmer who allegedly was attacked by a vampire years before, died while haying. After his death, people began to die in the surrounding area, and it was believed that Pale had returned to prey on his neighbors. The two incidents were well documented. Government officials examined the bodies, wrote case reports, and published books throughout Europe. The hysteria, which is commonly referred to as the 18th century vampire controversy, well, this raged for a generation. The problem was exacerbated by rural epidemics of so-called clean vampire attacks, which undoubtedly caused a higher amount of superstition in the communities, with locals starting to dig up bodies, and in some cases, staking them. The controversy only ceased when Empress Maria Theresa of Austria sent her personal physician, Gerhard von Swieten, to investigate the claims of vampiric entities. He concluded that vampires did not exist, and that the Empress passed laws prohibiting the opening of the graves and the desecration of bodies. This sounded the end of the vampiric epidemics. Despite this condemnation, though, the vampire lived on in artistic works and in local superstition. The vampire legend began to take on a more modern form in the 18th and 19th centuries, thanks in part to the rise of Gothic literature. Authors such as Bram Stoker, John Polidori, J. Sheridan Le Fanu, they helped popularize the image of the vampire as a supernatural creature that could transform into a bat, a mist, control the minds of its victims, and he was vulnerable to sunlight and garlic. And he also despised silver, all things biblical. All right, so Uncle Jay had to hit the brakes for just a second. If you never had an opportunity to see the movie Dracula 2000, well, that's an excellent vampire movie. Now, it throws you everything into a twist. Now, I always wondered what made Dracula become Dracula, what happened and stuff. Well, this story, it tells you a little bit more about it. Number one, being repulsed by silver. Number two, repulsed by anything biblical, anything Christian, hating the cross. Now the garlic, well, I don't exactly know where the garlic comes in at. But anyway, this movie, well, throws a little twist. You need to watch it. Probably one of the best vampire movies I've ever seen. One of Gerard Butler's first movies. And, well, of course, for my generation, I guess Lost Boys was probably the best vampire movie. It probably rates up there a little bit better than this one. I don't know. But anyway, let's get back to the origins of the vampires. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button if you like what old Uncle Jay's doing. Well, the most popular vampire story in history would have to be Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, most scholars believe that old Bram based his evil Count Dracula on a real-life 15th century prince in Wallachia, Romania, Vlad Dracula, Vlad, son of the dragon, or Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. Now, as his story come down through history, well, he was a savage and brutal ruler, and his brutality against enemy troops consisted of having them set awkwardly on stakes with sharp points, and as their leg muscles gave out, the point of the stake would impale them through the length of their body. Thus he was named Vlad Tepes, which means Vlad the Impaler. However, impaling was not Vlad's only method of torture and murder. He was creative as he possibly could be, and people also knew him to boil his victims or cut off their limbs and other body parts. Additionally, Vlad mutilated organs, skinned and scalped people, or just simply let the animals eat them. And it's not clear where he initially got the idea for this kind of torture, but reports say that he even used these methods on women and children. Saxon records indicate that Vlad Tepes killed around 40,000 to 100,000 people. But it is uncertain if he actually drank his victims' blood or whether this was just another tale that was created much later. One theory about the origins of the vampire legend is that it was influenced by medical misunderstandings at the time. Diseases such as porphyria or anemia can cause people to exhibit symptoms such as sensitivity to light and a paler skin, leading to rumors that they'd been bitten by a vampire or possessed by a blood-sucking demon. In addition, the process of decomposition can cause the skin to take on a reddish hue as if the corpse has recently consumed blood. Also, the hair continues to appear to grow along with the fingernails, leading to speculation more and more about the undead. In times gone by, it was common for normal people to believe in creatures that we don't today. People would warn their children to stay away from monsters like the werewolf, elves, and even vampires. Now, this may sound bizarre to our modern ears, though, but even today there are some people who believe in vampires, and maybe they're right to do so. Over many centuries, stories have emerged claiming to be cases of real vampires. Across Europe, North America, there are dozens of these cases of locals believing it was evil living among them. It's hard to get down to the reality of these cases, as they were so long ago, but they're still creepy. The Highgate vampire was a reported case of a vampire living in the Highgate Cemetery in London, a Victorian cemetery. Highgate made international news headlines back in the 70s for a dark legend that surrounded it. Apparently, there was a mysterious and violent vampire who lived in the cemetery during this time. He reportedly attacked several visitors to the cemetery before disappearing into the fog. The vampire was said to be worshipped by a group of witches who would lure ordinary humans into the cemetery for him to attack. All the media coverage drew attention to a local priest who described himself as a genuine vampire hunter. Now, this sounds like something from a movie, but the man really existed, and he claimed to have found and killed the vampire, but no one believed him. The Atlas vampire is the name used to describe the criminal behind a mysterious murder that took place in Sweden in 1932. Now, this was a real case, quite horrific. A 32-year-old prostitute was found in her own apartment. She had been murdered 2 days prior to being found and had been struck in the head with a blunt object. Now, the most mysterious thing is that all her blood had been deliberately extracted after her death. And it was and still is believed that the murderer had been drinking her blood. Now, this case is over 80 years old and is still an unsolved mystery. Fritz Haarmann was a German serial killer popularly known as the Vampire of Hanover. We know for sure that he killed and mutilated over 24 young boys in the early 1900s. His usual method for murder was to bite into the neck of his victim and allow them to bleed to death. As more and more of his victims were found, local Germans began spreading rumors that a real-life vampire had come to town. Alleged cases of real vampires weren't an uncommon thing during this period, but were usually baseless. But here's the real thing biting through people's necks like Count Dracula himself. Fritz Haarmann was eventually captured by police and executed shortly thereafter. While the vampire legend may have originated in ancient cultures, it's taken on some new forms in modern times. The popularity of vampire fiction and movies has helped create new mythology around these creatures. one that often focuses on their supernatural powers, their alluring personalities, and their romantic relationships. Some of these modern interpretations, such as Twilight series, well, they've been criticized for romanticizing dangerous and predatory behavior. Well, I'll tell you what, whether you believe in vampires or not, well, they make for good stories, and they make great movies. And if you don't mind, do me a favor. In the comments section, tell me what's your favorite vampire movie. And I'll tell you mine. Right now, mine is Dracula 2000 and Lost Boys. However, Village of the Damned and Interview with the Vampire rates right up there with me. But anyway, I hope you like what old Uncle Jay's doing. And if you do, hit that like and that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. And let that American flag wave at the end, and we'll see you